The year is 2011. The room is quiet. Too quiet for a bank boardroom. Sunlight streams through the big glass windows. It lands on a long mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine. 10 men in dark suits sit around it. At the head of the table is a younger man, Daniel Gable. He's the third generation to run Gable Land and Trust, the biggest agricultural finance company in the state. He never knew his grandfather, Frank Gable, the man who started it all with an auctioneer's gavel and a reputation for honesty. Daniel holds a portfolio in his hands, thick, bound in blue. It's a risk assessment for a new acquisition, a portfolio of distressed farms, 1,000 acres here, 5,000 there. The usual business of decline and consolidation. He flips a page, then another. He's looking at a proposal, a buyout offer for the entire distressed portfolio. One buyer for everything, an 8-figure deal. He scans the name on the offer sheet, the Hayes Foundation. He doesn't recognize it. He turns the page to the financial statement, and he stops. His finger freezes on a single line item. Liquidity. The number is staggering. All cash, no leverage. One of the older board members clears his throat, a man named Peterson. He leans forward. So, Daniel, the Hayes offer, what's the verdict? Daniel doesn't answer. He keeps staring at the paper. His eyes trace back up to the name. Hayes. The name feels like a stone in his shoe, a memory he doesn't know he has. He flips to the back of the portfolio, to the appendix, the foundation's history. He reads the founder's name, Arthur Hayes, and then he sees the origin story, a single paragraph. It mentions a farm auction in the spring of 1952 in Westbrook County. It mentions the auctioneer, a man who advised a young, broke farmer not to bid, advised him to let it go, for his own good. The auctioneer's name was Frank Gable. Daniel Gable puts the portfolio down on the table. The sound is a soft thud in the silent room. He looks at the men watching him. He feels something he can't quite name. Not shame, not yet. Something colder. The slow, dawning realization of a story he was born into, but never told. The story of a man who was told he couldn't, and the quiet 40-year answer that was now sitting on his desk. An offer to buy the world that had once cast him out. This channel is about stories like that, the ones you don't see on the news, the quiet triumphs that take a lifetime to build. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe, because what happened in that auction room in 1952 and in the 60 years that followed changed more than just one man's life. It changed the land itself. Let's go back, not to the boardroom, but to the dirt. The year is 1952. The month is March. The air smells of thaw and loss. Arthur Hayes stands in the yard of his family's farm, or what used to be his family's farm. He is 22 years old. He has the lean, hard look of a man who has worked since he could walk. His left sleeve is pinned at the elbow, a gift from a place called Korea, a place he fought for, while the bank fought his father. The bank won. His father, a good man worn down by 2 bad seasons and a broken heart. He had passed that winter, quietly, in his sleep, leaving Arthur with nothing but a name and a piece of advice. They stood on the porch a week before the end. The foreclosure notices were already tacked to the door. His father looked out over the 240 acres, good, rich bottomland, land his grandfather had cleared with mules. He put a hand on Arthur's shoulder, his good shoulder. "Artie," he said. His voice was thin as winter corn stalks. "They're going to take it all. The house, the barns, the tractors, everything I built, everything my father built. Arthur felt the rage rising in his throat, a hot, useless thing. His father squeezed his shoulder. But they can't take the dirt. Not really. They can hold a piece of paper that says it's theirs. But the dirt don't care about paper. The dirt remembers who works it. He coughed, a dry, racking sound. They took everything from me but the dirt. Remember that, son. The dirt is enough. A week later, he was gone. And a month after that, everything was gone. Sold at auction on the courthouse steps. The tractors, the plows, the baler, the family silverware, his mother's wedding ring. Arthur watched it all go. He stood at the back of the crowd, one arm, no money, no future. Just a ringing in his ears, and his father's words. The dirt is enough. The auction for the land was set for the following week. The auctioneer was a man named Frank Gable. Everyone knew Frank. He was a pillar of the community, coached the Little League team, served on the church board, a genuinely decent man. He had known Arthur's father for 30 years, played poker with him. Frank had a reputation for fairness, but also for practicality. He believed in numbers. He believed in what was possible, and he hated to see good people chase impossible dreams. He saw it as a form of cruelty. The morning of the land auction, Arthur was there. He stood at the back. He had $54 in his pocket, money he'd earned mucking out stalls for a neighbor. It was all he had in the world. The farm was being sold in 3 parcels. Parcel A, 100 acres of prime bottomland with the house and barns. Parcel B, 60 acres of good pasture. And Parcel C. Nobody wanted Parcel C. 80 acres of what the locals called the scab. It was the back 80 of the Hayes farm. Rocky, hilly, and half of it was a sour swamp. It had never been properly farmed. Arthur's grandfather had tried. He'd broken 2 plows and a mule's leg on it. After that, they just left it. A place for scrub pine and poison ivy to grow. It was considered worthless. Frank Gable started the auction. His voice boomed across the courthouse lawn, a voice full of confidence and good cheer. He sold Parcel A in 10 minutes. A syndicate of doctors from the city bought it. They planned to turn it into a hunting club. He sold Parcel B in 5. A neighboring dairy farmer bought it. Then he got to Parcel C. Frank sighed. He took off his hat and wiped his brow. "All right, folks," he said. "Next up, we got Parcel C. 80 acres, more or less." He didn't even read the description. Everyone knew. "Let's start the bidding at..." He paused. $10 an acre? Silence. A few people chuckled. $5 an acre? Someone in the back coughed. Frank Gable was a proud man. He didn't like to fail to sell a piece of land. It was a mark against his reputation. "All right," he said, his voice tight. "Who will give me $1 an acre? $80 for 80 acres, just to get it off the county books." And from the back of the crowd, a single voice, quiet but clear. "I will." It was Arthur Hayes. A murmur went through the crowd. People turned to look. They saw the boy, the pinned sleeve, the look on his face. Frank Gable saw him too, and his expression changed. The professional auctioneer disappeared, and the concerned neighbor took his place. He looked at Arthur, a long, measuring look. He saw the desperation, the foolish, youthful hope, and he decided to be kind. "Arthur," he said. His voice was gentle now. "Son, you don't want that land." Arthur stood straight. His voice was steady. "I bid $1 an acre, Mr. Gable." Frank shook his head slowly. No, son. He stepped down from the auction block, walked right through the crowd until he stood in front of Arthur. He put a hand on Arthur's good shoulder. The whole crowd was silent, listening. Son, I've known your family my whole life. I respected your father. This is a hard day, a terrible day, but you can't fix it by buying that piece of worthless rock. There's no farm there. There's just heartbreak. You'll pour your life into it for nothing. I'm not going to be the man who sells you that. It would be a sin. Let it go. Go to the city. Get a job. Make a new life. This one is over. He was so certain, so kind. His eyes were full of genuine pity, and that was the worst part. It wasn't anger, it wasn't contempt. It was a soft, paternal certainty, the absolute conviction that he knew what was best for Arthur, that he was protecting him. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend, by someone who genuinely believed they were helping you, someone who thought your dreams were a danger to you. That is the loneliest fight in the world, because you cannot fight kindness with anger. You can only fight it with your life, with decades of work, with a stubborn refusal to believe the verdict. If you have ever felt that, drop a comment below. Tell us about the person who told you no for your own good. Because what Arthur did next is for everyone who has ever been gently, kindly, reasonably written off. Arthur looked at Frank Gable. He looked at the crowd. He saw the pity in their eyes. He felt the weight of their certainty. He took a breath. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He just said 2 words. Sold, then. Frank Gable stared at him, confused. What? You said you wouldn't be the man to sell it to me, Arthur said. So you're giving it to me? The crowd gasped. Frank Gable's face turned red. He was a man of his word, and a man of pride. He had been outmaneuvered by a one-armed boy with nothing to lose. He stepped back. His face was a mask of cold fury. Sold, he barked, to Arthur Hayes, for $1. He turned and walked back to the block without another word. The gavel came down like a gunshot. The sound echoed across the courthouse lawn. Arthur Hayes owned 80 acres of hell. He paid his $1. He took the deed, a single piece of paper. He walked away from the crowd. He didn't look back. He walked the 4 miles to his new property. He stepped over the crumbling stone wall, and for the first time, he set foot on his own land. It was worse than he remembered. Rocks the size of hay bales, scrub pines so thick you couldn't see the sky, a stagnant, stinking swamp in the middle. He stood there for a long time. The sun began to set. The enormity of what he had done washed over him. Frank Gable was right. This was impossible. This was a fool's errand. He sank to his knees. The dirt was cold and damp. He put his hand on it. He could feel the rocks just beneath the surface. He closed his eyes. He could hear his father's voice. The dirt is enough. He opened his eyes. It was almost dark. He got to his feet. He had $53 left. No house, no tools, no help. Just a promise to a ghost, and 80 acres of the worst land in the state. The work began the next day. He had no tractor. He had no mule. He had one good arm. He spent his $53, not on food, not on shelter. He bought an axe, a shovel, and a 15-year-old plow, the kind you pull yourself. He built a lean-to against a rock ledge. He drank from the stream that fed the swamp. He ate what he could find, berries, roots, the occasional rabbit he could trap. And he worked. He started with the trees, one by one, with a single arm. The axe would swing, thud into the wood. He'd pull it out, swing again, for 16 hours a day. The sound of that axe became the rhythm of his life. Chop, breathe, chop, breathe. The neighbors heard it from a mile away, that steady, relentless sound. They shook their heads. Poor Arthur Hayes, he's lost his mind. Frank Gable was right. The boy is breaking himself on those rocks. But the sound didn't stop. For a whole year, the sound of that axe. He cleared 5 acres, 5 acres of stumps and rocks. He used the logs to build a small dam, to divert the stream, to begin to drain the swamp. He used a lever and a fulcrum, old knowledge, to move the rocks. The smaller ones, anyway. The ones the size of a man's head. He built walls with them. Long, straight lines of stone, defining the edges of his hope. He slept on the ground. He got thin. He got hard. He didn't talk to anyone. He just worked. One day, a farmer drove by on the road, a man named Silas. He had known Arthur's father. He stopped his truck and watched. He saw the boy, the one-armed boy, straining against a rock with a wooden pole. He watched for an hour. The boy did not stop, did not rest. Just that slow, grinding effort. Silas went home. The next morning he came back. He had his 2 sons with him, and a team of mules. He pulled up to the stone wall. Arthur stopped working. He looked at Silas, wary. Silas spat on the ground. "My father told me your grandfather once pulled his wagon out of the mud, saved his whole crop. He said a Hayes always pays their debts." He looked at the field of rocks. "Looks like you could use a hand." Arthur didn't say anything. His pride was a hard, sharp thing in his chest. Silas's son grinned. "Don't argue with him, Art. He's been talking about this all night. You're cutting into our chores." And so, for one day, Arthur Hayes had help. They hitched the mules to the big rocks, the ones Arthur couldn't move. They dragged them to the edge of the field. They pulled the stumps. By the end of the day, there was a patch of ground, 5 acres, ugly, stained, but clear. Silas looked at it. He looked at Arthur. The boy was covered in mud and sweat. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were alive. "What are you going to plant?" Silas asked. "Everyone knows this soil is sour, too acidic. Nothing will grow here but pines." Arthur pointed to the swamp. "That swamp is full of peat. For 1,000 years, leaves and cattails have been rotting in there. The soil isn't sour, it's just unbalanced." He had a plan. It wasn't just brute force, it was knowledge. Things his grandfather had talked about, old ways, ways before the chemical fertilizers, before the big machines. He spent the next year hauling peat from the swamp, bucket by bucket, with one arm. He mixed it with the rocky soil. He used the wood ash from his fires. To raise the pH, he built a compost pile. He was amending the soil, healing it. The neighbors watched. They saw him planting, not corn, not soy, the things that made money. He planted buckwheat, a cover crop, something to hold the soil, and then he planted clover, to fix the nitrogen. He wasn't farming for profit. He was farming for the future. He was building soil. In the 3rd year, he planted potatoes. They grew, not well, but they grew. He ate them all winter. He sold a few bags in town, for pennies, but it was a start. It was proof. Something could grow on the scab. Frank Gable heard about it. He drove by one day, in his new Buick. He saw the small patch of green, the neat stone walls. The tiny cabin Arthur had built from his cleared pines. He saw Arthur, working in the field. He didn't stop. He just slowed down and watched. Then he drove away, a strange feeling in his gut. Let me tell you about the next 40 years, because this is where the story of one man becomes the story of a place. The first 10 years were a slow, brutal grind. Each year Arthur cleared a few more acres, he moved a few more rocks, he hauled a few more tons of peat. He lived on potatoes and hope. He bought nothing he couldn't pay for with cash. The money from his small potato crop went to buy a goat. The goat gave milk, and another generation of goats. He sold the goats. He bought a pig. He never took a loan. He never asked for credit. He remembered the foreclosure notice. He remembered what debt did to his father. Self-sufficiency was his only creed. By 1960, he had 20 acres in cultivation. The soil was getting better, darker, richer. He was rotating crops, using companion planting, techniques no one in the county had used for 50 years. His yields were still low, but his costs were zero. He had no fuel bill, no fertilizer bill, no seed bill because he saved his own. The other farmers laughed. They were getting bigger, buying new tractors, John Deere 4010s, farming fence row to fence row. Their yields were huge, but so were their debts. They were chasing a number on a ledger. Arthur was building a foundation. Then came the expansion. It started in 1965. The dairy farmer who had bought Parcel B, he got old. His sons didn't want the farm. He was selling out. He offered the 60 acres to Arthur. "You know that land better than anyone," he said. "Your father loved that pasture." Arthur walked the land. He knew every inch of it. He went to the farmer. "I'll give you $200 an acre," he said. Cash. It was less than the market rate, but it was cash. No banks, no lawyers, no waiting. The farmer took it. And for the first time in 13 years, a piece of the old Hayes farm came home. Arthur now owned 140 acres. He worked them with his growing collection of goats and his own 2 hands. Or rather, his one. He adapted. He invented. He couldn't afford a modern tractor, so he bought a broken one. A 1948 Alice Chalmers Model G, a strange rear-engine machine. The engine was shot. He spent a winter rebuilding it. He couldn't work the clutch and the throttle with one hand, so he devised a system of levers, connected to a foot pedal. He could operate the entire machine, with one arm and one foot. People saw him driving it. They called it the one-armed bandit. They didn't understand. He wasn't disabled. He was an inventor. Exclusion is the mother of innovation. When you are denied access to the standard tools, you are forced to create better ones. In 1972, the hunting club from the city went bust. Parcel A, the old home place, the house, the barns. 100 acres of the best land in the county. It went up for auction. This time, the auction was at the Gable Auction House, run by Frank Gable's son, Frank Jr. Frank Sr. was retired, but he was there, sitting in the back. He watched as Arthur Hayes walked in. Arthur was 42 years old now. He was no longer a boy. He was a man made of leather and rock. He didn't stand in the back this time. He walked to the front row and sat down. The bidding was fast. A big corporate farm wanted the land. The price went up. $200 an acre. $300. $400. It stalled at $450. The corporate man was confident. The auctioneer was about to call it. Going once, going twice, and then a voice from the front row. Quiet. calm. 500, cash. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at Arthur. The corporate man scoffed. He conferred with his partner. 510, he said. Arthur didn't hesitate. 600, cash. The word hung in the air. Cash. It was a weapon. The corporate farm operated on credit, on leverage. Their cash was tied up. They couldn't compete with a man who dealt in dollars, not debt. They shook their heads. They were out. The gavel fell. Sold. To Arthur Hayes. Arthur stood up. He didn't smile. He didn't look triumphant. He just nodded to the auctioneer. As he walked out, he passed the back row. He saw Frank Gable sitting there, an old man now. Their eyes met. For just a second. Arthur saw something in the old man's face. Regret? Admiration? He couldn't be sure. He just nodded once and walked out. He was the owner of the Hayes farm again, all 240 acres of it. But that's not the end of the story, because this is where it gets bigger. The 1980s were hard on farmers. Debt crisis, low prices, foreclosures everywhere. The big got bigger, and the small got crushed. But not Arthur Hayes. He had no debt. His costs were almost nothing. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. His soil, which he had spent 30 years building, was a miracle. During a drought in '88, his neighbor's corn withered. Their topsoil blew away in the wind. Arthur's corn was fine. His soil was so rich with organic matter, it held water like a sponge. He started buying land, quietly. The farms around him started to fail. The ones run by the big corporations. The ones that had laughed at his methods. He'd get a knock on the door, a farmer, his hat in his hands. "Art, I'm losing the farm. The bank is taking it." Arthur would listen. He'd walk the land, and he'd make an offer, always below market value, but always in cash. By 1990, he owned 500 acres, cash. By 1995, 1,000, cash. By 2000, he owned 3,000 acres, all bought with money he earned from the dirt. He never expanded too fast. He never bought a piece of land until he had the soil on his own farm ready to heal it. He would take these dead, chemical-soaked fields, and he would give them the Hayes treatment. Cover crops, animal manure, years of rest. He was healing the land, one failed farm at a time. He became a legend, the quiet farmer, the man with one arm, the man who bought the world with potatoes. People came to him for advice, university professors, agricultural scientists. They studied his soil. They analyzed his methods. They gave it a name: regenerative agriculture. Arthur just called it farming. He never gave speeches. He never wrote a book. If people asked him the secret, he'd just point to the ground. "The dirt is enough," he'd say. And then came the reckoning. The year is 2011. Daniel Gable sits in his boardroom, the Hayes Foundation portfolio in his hands. He reads the story of the auction, the story of his grandfather. He feels a flush of shame so hot it feels like a fever. He cancels the rest of his meetings. He gets in his car. He drives 2 hours, out of the city, into the country, to Westbrook County. He drives down roads his grandfather drove, past farms his grandfather sold. He finds the Hayes farm. It doesn't look like a corporate headquarters. It looks like a farm. The original house is there, perfectly maintained. The barns are pristine. There's a new building, a long, low-slung wooden structure. A sign out front says, "The Hayes Center for Soil Regeneration." Daniel parks his car. He gets out. He sees a man sitting on the porch of the old farmhouse. An old man, very old. He has a cane across his lap. His left sleeve is pinned at the elbow. It's Arthur Hayes. He's 81 years old. Daniel walks up the path. His heart is pounding. What does he say? I'm sorry? My grandfather was wrong? How do you apologize for a 60-year-old mistake? A mistake made from kindness. Arthur watches him approach. His eyes are clear and calm. He doesn't get up. Daniel stops at the bottom of the porch steps. Mr. Hayes, he says. His voice is shaking. My name is Daniel Gable. Frank Gable was my grandfather. Arthur Hayes just nods. I know who you are, he says. His voice is quiet, like stones rubbing together. Daniel takes a breath. I was reading your foundation's file this morning. I saw the part about the auction. In 1952. He doesn't know what else to say. Arthur looks out over the fields, the rich, dark soil, the healthy crops. Your grandfather was a good man, he says. He thought he was protecting me. Daniel feels a surge of relief. And then Arthur says the next part, and it guts him. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind. That's the loneliest work a man can do. He looked at Daniel. His eyes held no malice, just a deep, profound weariness. It cost you nothing, your grandfather's certainty. It cost me 20 years of my life. 20 years of eating potatoes in a shack, while the men who owned my father's house used it for a weekend party spot. Daniel just stands there, speechless. There is nothing to say. The truth of it is too heavy. Finally, he finds his voice. We're losing those farms, he says. The ones in the portfolio. The big ones. The soil is dead. The yields are dropping. We don't know what to do. We need your help. The great-grandson of the man who told him he couldn't, standing on his porch, begging him for the secret. Arthur Hayes could have laughed. He could have gloated. He could have told him to get off his land. He did none of those things. He just looked at Daniel Gable, the boy with the soft hands and the expensive suit, and he saw a man who was lost, just like he had been, all those years ago. The dirt is enough, Arthur said, but you have to be willing to serve it, not own it. Come inside, son. Let's have some coffee. The story doesn't end there. The Hayes Foundation did not buy the distressed portfolio. Instead, Arthur Hayes made a different deal. He partnered with the Gable Trust. They created a new fund, a fund to transition conventional farms to regenerative practices. They didn't foreclose on failing farms. They retrained them. They sent out teams of young farmers, graduates of the Hayes Center, to teach the old ways, the ways of soil health. The legacy of Arthur Hayes wasn't in the land he owned. It was in the knowledge he shared. He created scholarships for young farmers with no capital, especially for veterans. He made sure no young person with a dream to farm would ever hear the words Frank Gable spoke to him. He passed away in 2015 at the age of 85. He was buried on a hill overlooking the original 80 acres, the Scab, which was now the most fertile land in the county. His gravestone is a simple field stone, pulled from one of his own walls. It has his name, the dates, and one sentence. The dirt is enough. Today, if you go to the Hayes Center, you can see it, hanging on the wall in the main hall. A simple wooden cane, whittled from an old fence post, the one Arthur Hayes used in his last years. It's a physical object, a bridge from the past, a reminder that the most powerful tools are not made of steel, but of conviction. People touch it, they run their hands over the smooth, worn wood, and they remember the story of a man who was told to let it go, and instead held on for a lifetime. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is standing in front of their own version of Parcel C. their own piece of worthless, rocky ground. And someone they respect, someone they love, is telling them to walk away, telling them it's impossible, for their own good. This story is for them. It's a reminder that the world's certainty is no match for your stubborn refusal to fail. That limitations are often just a story someone else tells about you, and that sometimes the most profound act of rebellion is to simply go to work and let the work be your answer. If this story reminded you of someone who needs to hear that it's possible, share it with them. Don't let these stories fade away. Subscribe for more stories of quiet, relentless triumph. And in the comments, tell us, what is the worthless land you refuse to give up on? Because the world is changed, not by the loud voices that declare what's impossible, but by the quiet hands that prove them wrong. One rock, one acre, one lifetime at a time.